Little slave girl who reads Latin saves the baby, then exposes the ledger that changes everything. A small girl with perfect memory stands in the doctor's back room while steam curls from boiling herbs. She whispers Latin words that contradict the bottle label, and a dying infant draws breath. But in the smokehouse shadows, her fingers find a hidden ledger that reveals a truth no overseer wanted told. Green wax seals, switched babies, forged papers spanning years of lies. Dogs bay in the distance as patrollers close in. A courthouse bell begins to toll. The girl who saved one life now holds evidence that could free dozens or cost her everything. When the crowd gathers on the courthouse steps and she opens her mouth to speak, will her perfect memory become her salvation? Or will the truth she remembers be the very words that seal her fate? The morning mist clung to the river like wet muslin when Anis stepped into the wagon. 10 years old, small for her age, with eyes that caught every flicker of movement and ears that held every note. The ribboned locket at her throat swayed with the wagon's creak as Moses clicked his tongue to the mule. "Town day," he said, his voice low. "Mind your step, child. Mind your words." The ferry crossing took forever and no time at all. Water slapped the wooden hull. Anis hummed under her breath a hymn her mother had sung, though the words came in pieces now. Moses listened. His weathered hands stayed steady on the reins, but she saw how his eyes tracked the other passengers. A merchant with a ledger book, 2 men with patroller badges, a young woman in green silk who never looked at the water. "That's Miss Lorena," Moses whispered as they neared the landing. "Harrow family. Lost her mother last winter. Got a sharp tongue now." The town square buzzed with morning trade, barrels of molasses, sacks of corn, women with baskets calling out the day's prices. Anis carried the market list in her apron pocket, each item memorized. Salt, lamp oil, medicine for old Aunt Della's cough. She was reaching for a dropped parcel when it happened. The green silk rustled as Miss Lorena stumbled, books and paper packets scattered across the wet cobblestones. Anis bent quick, gathering the spilled items before they could soak through. The locket swung forward as she worked, catching the light. "Thank you," started from Lorena's lips, then stopped. Cold eyes took in the brown face, the careful movements, the way Anis's gaze stayed lowered. The patroller badge glinted nearby. Other faces turned to watch. "Slaves are disgusting." The words cut the morning air like a bell's clap, sharp, final, meant to be heard by every ear in the square. Anis's hands stilled for half a heartbeat. The locket seemed to grow heavy against her throat. Then she finished gathering the papers, rose slowly, and offered them with a bow. "Yes, miss." Shame flickered behind Lorena's green eyes, quick as summer lightning. She snatched the parcels without looking at Anis's face. The crowd murmured. The patroller stepped closer. "Where's your pass, girl?" Moses appeared with the worn paper, hands steady. "Dr. Errand, sir. Medicine for the plantation." The patroller's gaze lingered on Anis. Something in her careful movements, her lowered eyes, caught his attention. "Carry it to the doctor, then straight back," he warned, tapping the passport. "No dawdling." The doctor's office sat at the end of Main Street, squeezed between the blacksmith and the grain store. Jars lined the shelves, dark tonics, powdered herbs, things that smelled of bitter earth and healing. "Doctor." Lyle bent over his ledger, scratching notes with a quill that needed mending. "Aunt Della's cough remedy," Moses said, setting coin on the scarred wooden counter. Doctor." Lyle reached for a brown bottle, then paused. Voices rose from the back room. A woman's cry, a baby's struggling breath. "Miriam," Lorena's voice cracked with fear. "Doctor." Lyle rushed toward the sound. Anis found herself following, Moses close behind. In the back room, steam curled from a kettle of boiling herbs. Lorena knelt beside a wooden cradle where an infant jerked and shuddered, tiny fists clenched. "The fever mixture." "Doctor," Lyle muttered, reaching for a bottle. "5 drops, the bottle says." Anis saw the Latin note first, a scrap of paper misfiled behind the medicine bottles. Her eyes caught the careful script, the words that didn't match the bottle's label. "Minimum dosim," she whispered. Dr. Lyle's hand froze. "What did you say?" "The note," Anis pointed with a trembling finger. "It says minimum dose. The bottle label is wrong." Silence filled the steamy room. "Doctor." Lyle snatched the paper, held it to the lamplight. His face went pale. 2 drops, he breathed. Dear God, 2 drops, not 5. The corrected dose went into the baby's mouth. Lorena's hands shook as she held the tiny form. 1 breath, 2. Then Miriam's eyes opened, clear and calm. The rigid muscles softened. Doctor. Lyle stared at Anis as if seeing her for the first time. Who taught you Latin, child? The words stuck in Anis's throat. Her mother, before the fever took her. Evening lessons by candlelight. Books hidden in the loft. All of it forbidden now. I remember things, she said finally. Words, sounds, everything stays. Steam from the kettle fogged the window glass. Lorena's eyes remained fixed on baby Miriam's steady breathing. The locket at Anis's throat caught the lamplight as she swallowed hard. When they returned to the front office, a small crowd had gathered. Word traveled fast in a river town. Doctor. Lyle's voice carried through the open doorway. The beautiful little slave girl who reads Latin, he announced to the waiting faces. She saved the child's life. The patroller in the doorway stiffened. His eyes narrowed on Anis with new suspicion. Book-learnt slaves meant trouble. Everyone knew that. Lorena stepped forward, her cheeks flushed. The morning's words hung in the air between them like smoke. Slaves are disgusting, she repeated, but softer now. Uncertain. Old Mrs. Bell, the Quaker woman, clicked her tongue. Disgusting, you say? That child's got more sense than grown folks. More heart, too. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The patroller's hand moved to his belt. Anis felt the weight of every stare, every whisper. Her gift had saved a life. It might cost her own. A bell tolled from the church tower. Storm wind pressed the shutters like a warning hand. Dr. Lyle sealed his ledger with red wax, the stamp clicking against the wooden desk. Storm coming? Moses said, appearing at Anis's elbow. Best get home. The wagon ride back to the plantation passed in tense quiet. Rain drummed against the canvas cover. Lorena sat across from Anis, her green dress dark with damp. The baby cousin slept peaceful in her arms. Anis hummed under her breath the same hymn from the morning, but different notes now. Lower. Calmer. The mule's ears pricked forward, matching the rhythm of her voice. Its breathing slowed to match the gentle tempo. How do you do that? Lorena asked suddenly. Anis's humming stopped. She touched the locket at her throat. Do what, miss? The animals. They listen to you. Follow your voice. Everything has a song, Anis said carefully. Every heartbeat, every breath, you just have to find the right note. Lorena studied her through the grey rain light. Something in her face had changed since the doctor's office. The sharp edges had softened, just a little. At the plantation gate, dogs surged from the shadows. Big hounds with voices like thunder, bred for hunting runaway souls. They bayed over the storm, teeth flashing in the lantern light. The gate boy fumbled with his keys. The dogs pressed closer. Lorena pulled the baby tight against her chest. Then Anis began to sing. Not words, just sound. A lullaby tempo that slid under the dogs' barking like water under ice. Her voice found the rhythm of their panting, then slowed it down. Breath by breath, note by note, the lead hound's bark faltered. His ears pricked forward. The others followed, their voices dropping to confused whines. They milled around the wagon wheels but didn't charge. Miracle, the gate boy whispered as he swung the iron bars wide. Moses clicked to the mule. The wagon rolled through into the plantation yard. Behind them, the dogs settled into quiet watch, still listening for that gentle voice in the storm. In the kitchen, Lorena ordered as they reached the big house. Daybreak finds you working, but her voice lacked its morning sharpness. She climbed the front steps, cradling baby Miriam, then paused at the door. The medicine worked because of you, she said without turning around. I won't forget. The kitchen door shut behind Anis with a soft latch click. Coals glowed in the great hearth. Bread dough rose under damp cloths, waiting for morning hands to shape it. The familiar smells of home wrapped around her yeast and wood smoke, and the faint lavender that old Aunt Della hung in bundles from the ceiling beams. Moses appeared through the servant's door, shaking rain from his coat. Trouble coming, he said low. That patroller got curious eyes. Anis nodded. She knew. The Latin words had marked her as surely as a brand. In a world where reading could mean death, perfect memory was both gift and curse. There's debts, Moses continued, settling beside the dying fire. Master Harrow owes money. The overseer Pike keeps accounts, but some say he keeps them crooked. If there's a ledger with the real numbers. Where would it be? Annis asked. Moses's eyes glinted. The smokehouse keeps secrets better than men. From upstairs came the sound of coughing. Master Harrow, sick with the same fever that had taken Lorena's mother. The storm wind pressed against the windows like searching hands. Annis touched her locket and hummed softly. The old hymn, the one her mother had sung on nights when the patrollers rode close. The melody held hidden meanings, directions, safe houses, river crossings mapped in notes and verses. If there's a ledger, she whispered, the smokehouse keeps secrets better than men. Moses smiled grimly. Child, you remember everything, don't you? Every word, every song, everything, Annis said. And for the first time since the town square, she smiled back. The storm settled into steady rain. In the big house, baby Miriam breathed easy. Dr. Lyle's seal dried on his ledger pages, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the kitchen walls, secrets waited to be found. Dawn came grey through kitchen windows. Annis worked with flour-dusted hands, shaping loaves while the house still slept. Steam rose from the bread ovens. Her humming echoed soft against stone walls. Moses appeared from the stables, boots wet with morning dew. Master's coughing worse, he said, keeping his voice low. Miss Lorena sat up with him all night. Annis nodded, kneading the dough with steady rhythm. From the dining room came the tick of the tall clock, counting out the hours until the overseer's return. Pike had ridden north on business, but his presence hung over the plantation like storm clouds. You mentioned the smokehouse, Annis said. Moses glanced toward the main house, then back. Pike built himself a fine office in town, but the old records stay here, bills, contracts. Family papers going back to Master's grandfather. He paused, listening to the coughing from upstairs. Some say those papers tell stories Pike don't want told. Through the window, Annis could see the smokehouse squatting dark among the outbuildings. Thick walls built for keeping meat through summer heat, perfect for hiding things that needed to stay cold and secret. After breakfast, Moses said, when Miss Lorena takes her meal upstairs. The morning passed slow. Annis served plates and cleared them. Her movements careful and quiet. Lorena ate little, her eyes red with sleeplessness. Baby Miriam cooed in her basket, healthy and bright after yesterday's close call. The fever's gotten worse, Lorena said as Annis poured fresh coffee. Father keeps asking for the old ledgers, something about debts and contracts. Annis kept her face still. Yes, miss. Pike handles the accounts, but father doesn't trust. Lorena stopped, catching herself. Slaves weren't meant to hear family business. Never mind, take the breakfast things. An hour later, Moses led Annis across the muddy yard. The smokehouse door creaked on iron hinges. Inside, the air hung thick with the smell of salt and cured meat. Ham hocks dangled from ceiling hooks. Barrels of brine lined the walls. Pike comes here sometimes, Moses said, running his hands along the wooden planks. Late at night, always alone. Annis closed her eyes, letting her memory work. The night sound she'd heard from the kitchen loft, footsteps crossing the yard, the smokehouse door opening and closing, a rhythm that spoke of regular visits, hidden work. Here, she said, pressing her palm against a section of wall near the hanging hooks. The wood felt different, newer, a board that had been removed and replaced. Moses produced a knife from his pocket. He worked the blade into the wood seam, prying gentle. The board shifted. Behind it lay a hollow space, and in that space, wrapped in oiled cloth, sat a leather-bound ledger. The pages rustled as Moses opened the book, columns of numbers, names, dates, all written in Pike's careful script. Dear Lord, Moses breathed. Annis read over his shoulder. Her perfect memory caught every detail, storing the figures and transactions. The real debts were half what Pike claimed. Money had been moved between accounts, hidden from Master Harrow's sight. And there, on a page dated 3 years past, an entry that made her blood run cold. Infant Miriam Blackwood, age 6 months, purchased from estate of deceased, papers filed as Harrow bloodkin to maintain family eligibility for credit extension. Switch the babies, Moses whispered. Pike bought that child and passed her off as Master's kin, Kept the family name good for borrowing. Footsteps sounded across the yard. Moses shut the ledger quick, wrapped it back in cloth, and slid it into the wall space. The loose board clicked into place just as the smokehouse door swung wide. "What are you doing in here?" Lorena stood silhouetted against the grey morning light. Her dress was dark blue today, proper for morning, and her face showed the strain of the sleepless night. "Checking the meat stores, miss," Moses said, stepping forward, "making sure the salt barrels are tight." Her eyes moved between them, suspicious. Then she noticed Anis near the wall, hand pressed against the wooden planks. "What's that behind the boards?" Anis's heart hammered. But before she could speak, the sound came, faint but clear. The scratch of claws on wood. Mice in the wall space, disturbed by their searching. "Rats," Anis said. "Big ones, sounds like." "Moses says we need more cats in here." Lorena wrinkled her nose. "Handle it. I want this place clean." She turned to leave, then paused. "Father's asking for you. Both of you. Says he needs to see the old hymnal." In the big house library, Master Harrow lay propped against pillows in his leather chair. The fever had left him gaunt, his breathing shallow. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. A fire crackled in the hearth, but he still shivered under his blankets. "The hymnal," he said, voice raspy. "Mother's old songbook. It's here somewhere." Lorena searched the shelves while Anis stood quiet by the door. Moses found the book on a low shelf, its leather cover worn smooth by generations of handling. "Sing something?" Master Harrow said, looking at Anis. "Your voice calmed the dogs yesterday. Might calm this cough." Anis opened the hymnal. The pages were yellow with age, the notes written in fading ink. Her eyes moved across the lines, reading both the music and the words beneath. But what she saw made her breath catch. The verses weren't just songs, they were maps. "Jordan Bend, Cedar Gate, Lantern 3, read the first verse." But Anis knew those weren't just words about a river crossing. They were directions, landmarks coded into hymn verses for those who knew how to read them. She began to sing, her voice finding the melody with perfect pitch. The notes filled the library like water, clear and flowing. Master Harrow's cough gradually quieted, his breathing eased, but Anis's mind raced as she sang. Each verse mapped a different route. Escape paths, safe houses. The old hymnal was a guidebook for the Underground Railroad, disguised as church music. "Beautiful," Lorena whispered when the song ended. Master Harrow's eyes had closed. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, the fever finally breaking. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Let him rest," Moses said. Outside the library, Lorena caught Anis's arm. "That song, I've heard you humming it before. What does it mean?" Anis met her eyes carefully. "It's about crossing over, miss. Going from one place to another, freedom on the far shore." Something flickered in Lorena's face. Understanding, maybe, or fear. "Keep the book," she said finally. "Father sleeps better when you sing." That evening, storm clouds gathered again. The river rose with spring rain, making the ferry crossings treacherous. In the kitchen loft where the servants slept, Anis lay on her straw mattock and studied the hymnal by candlelight. Each verse told a story. Cedar Gate meant the split-rail fence behind the church. Lantern 3 pointed to the third lamppost on Mill Street. Jordan Bend marked the river curve, where boats could land quiet in the dark. Moses climbed the ladder to the loft, bringing news from the stable hands. "Pike's coming back early," he said. "Rode hard through the storm. Somebody in town sent word about the doctor's office, about a slave girl who reads Latin." Anis closed the hymnal. "When?" "Tonight, maybe. Tomorrow for certain." Through the loft window, she could see lights moving across the plantation yard. Lanterns swinging in the hands of patrollers, checking the quarters, counting heads. The dogs bayed from their kennels. "Miss Lorena's been asking questions too," Moses continued. "About the family papers, about debts and contracts. She knows something's wrong with Pike's numbers." A new sound drifted through the storm. Hoofbeats on the river road, coming fast. Anis pressed her face to the window glass. Through the rain, she saw riders approaching the main gate, Pike in front, his coat black with wet. Behind him, 3 men with patroller badges and rifles across their saddle horns. "He brought friends," Moses said grimly. The riders stopped at the big house. Pike dismounted and strode up the front steps. Through the windows, Anis could see him talking with Lorena in the front parlor. His hands moved sharp as he spoke. Lorena shook her head, backing toward the stairs. Then Pike's voice rose, carrying across the yard. "That slave girl's got book learning. That's a hanging offense. And if Master Harrow's been teaching slaves to read, his debts come due immediate." Lorena's response came quieter, but Anis caught the words. "She saved Miriam's life. I won't forget that. You'll forget it if you want to keep this house." Moses touched Anis's shoulder. "Time to go, child." "Where?" He pointed to the hymnal in her hands. "Those songs you've been studying. Pick one, anyone. Time to see if they really lead somewhere safe." Anis opened the book to a page she'd memorized. "Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. River crossing." Moses nodded. "Church basement first, then the North Ferry. Mrs. Bell will have a wagon waiting." They climbed down from the loft, quiet as shadows. The kitchen stood empty, coals dying in the great hearth. Anis grabbed her mother's old shawl from its peg and wrapped the hymnal in its folds. At the kitchen door, she paused. The locket at her throat caught the last glow from the fire. Inside that locket lay a curl of hair from her mother and a scrap of paper with words in Latin. Words about freedom and family and promises that bind across generations. "Ready?" Moses whispered. Through the parlor windows, she could see Pike pacing while Lorena stood firm by the staircase. The baby cousin slept peaceful in her basket, unaware that her whole world was built on lies. Anis touched the locket one more time, then followed Moses into the storm. The rain washed their tracks as they made their way across the plantation grounds. Behind them, the big house blazed with lamplight. Ahead lay the dark paths mapped in hymn verses, leading toward whatever freedom might wait on the far shore. "Wade in the water," Anis hummed under her breath as they disappeared into the night. "God's gonna trouble the water." The church basement smelled of damp stone and old books. Anis crouched between wooden crates while Moses spoke in whispers with Mrs. Bell. Quilts hung from the ceiling beams, star patterns and flying geese, each one mapping safe routes to the north. "Patrollers are riding the main roads," Mrs. Bell said, her Quaker dress rustling as she moved. "But the storms made the river wild. Ferries not running till dawn." Through the basement window, Anis could see lantern light dancing across the water, Pike's men searching the banks. Dogs bayed in the distance, following cold trails through the rain. "The hymn," Anis said, touching the book wrapped in her mother's shawl. "It mentions a second crossing, where the cedar splits the current. What does that mean?" Mrs. Bell's eyes sharpened. "There's an old ford, half a mile upstream. Tree fell across it years ago. Makes a natural bridge when the water's not too high. And tonight, risky, but possible." Moses studied Anis in the lamplight. "Child, you sure about this? Once we cross that water, there's no coming back. Pike will burn the quarters looking for you." Anis thought of Lorena standing in the parlor, defending her to Pike's face. Of Master Harrow's fever breaking when she sang. Of baby Miriam breathing easy because Latin words had saved her life. "The ledger," she said. "It proves Pike's been stealing. Switching babies, hiding debts. If Lorena could see those numbers." "That ledger's gone by now," Moses said. "Pike's no fool." But Anis shook her head. "He doesn't know we found it. And even if he burns the book, I remember every page, every number, every lie." Mrs. Bell leaned forward. "What are you thinking, child? The hymn maps more than river crossings. It shows hiding places too. Rock of Ages, cleft for me. That's not just about salvation. It's about the cave behind the church graveyard. And in the sweet by and by that points to the old well house, where things get hidden." Understanding dawned in Moses's weathered face. "You think there's more than one ledger. Pike's careful. He'd keep copies. Evidence to protect himself if the Harrows ever turned on him." Through the basement walls came the sound of hoofbeats. The patrollers had reached the church. Lantern light swept across the windows. "Mrs. Bell blew out the lamp. Quiet now." They huddled in the darkness while boots tramped overhead. Pike's voice carried through the floorboards. "Search every corner. That girl's got reading in her head. Can't let her spread it to the others." The search lasted an hour. Finally, the hoofbeats moved on toward the river. Mrs. Bell relit the lamp with shaking hands. "They'll be back," she said, "but they missed the old tunnel entrance." leads right under the graveyard to the well house. The tunnel was older than the church, dug by early settlers who'd needed a way to reach water during Indian raids. Now it served a different purpose. Annis crawled through the narrow space with the hymnal clutched tight, following Mrs. Bell's sure steps through the underground dark. The well house sat at the edge of the graveyard, its stone walls thick with moss. Inside, the old well opened black and deep. But what caught Annis's attention were the loose stones around the rim, hiding places, just like the smokehouse wall. She ran her hands over the stones, feeling for the one that moved different. There behind the iron bucket handle, a stone that shifted when pressed. The space behind it held another oiled cloth bundle. This ledger was older, its pages yellow with age. But the handwriting was Pike's, and the story it told made Annis's blood run cold. 3 babies switched, she whispered, reading by lamplight. Not just Miriam. 2 others, years before. Pike's been selling real Harrow children and replacing them with purchased infants, keeping the family name clean for debt, while the true bloodline got sold south. Mrs. Bell's face went pale. Dear Lord, the Harrow line's been corrupted for years. And here, Annis pointed to another page, a manumission clause. Master Harrow's father promised freedom to the family of a slave woman named Rachel. That's my grandmother's name. The clause should have passed to her children and grandchildren. Moses leaned close. What happened to it? Pike filed it wrong, made it look like it only applied to one person, not the whole bloodline. But the original wording's right here. Annis's finger traced the Latin text. Libertatis in perpetuum, freedom in perpetuity, for the family line. Outside the well house, dogs began barking, getting closer. They've picked up the scent, Mrs. Bell said. We need to move. But Annis was studying another entry in the ledger. There's a name here, Clerk Whitcomb, at the courthouse. Pike writes about him using a chipped ring for official seals. Green wax, special ordered from Richmond. What's special about green wax? Only certain clerks use it, for the most important documents, and if this ring has a chip in it, that makes it easy to identify, like a signature. The dogs were close now. Through the well-house window, Annis could see torches moving between the gravestones. If I could get to Clerk Whitcomb, she said, show him these ledger entries. Prove the ring matches the old Harrow filings. Child, Moses said gently, that courthouse is surrounded by patrollers. You'd never make it to the clerk's office. Then we bring the evidence to him. Mrs. Bell frowned. How? Annis touched her locket, thinking. Pike's planning something. He wouldn't have brought patrollers just to chase one runaway slave. He's moving fast because something's forcing his hand. The debts, Moses said suddenly. Master Harrow's been asking questions. If Lorena starts digging into the family papers, Pike has to act now. Sell off the fand. Problem slaves before anyone can prove his books are cooked. Annis closed the ledger careful, which means he'll need court orders. Legal papers. Court day, Mrs. Bell breathed. Tomorrow's the monthly hearing. Pike would file his papers then. The torches were at the well-house door. Pike's voice cut through the night. Spread out. Check every building. Annis made her choice. She pressed the ledger into Mrs. Bell's hands. Get this to Clerk Whitcomb. Tell him to look for the green wax on old Harrow filings. I'll meet you at the courthouse. What are you doing? Going back. Moses grabbed her arm. That's madness, child. Lorena defended me tonight. She knows something's wrong. If I can get to her, show her what Pike's really been doing. She's still a white woman. Still owns you. Annis pulled free, her voice steady. She saved baby Miriam by letting me read that Latin note. Maybe she'll save others by reading the truth in those ledger pages. The dogs were scratching at the well-house door. Mrs. Bell grabbed a handful of pepper from her herb pouch and scattered it on the floor. That'll confuse their noses for a few minutes. Tunnel leads back to the church basement. From there, you can slip out the vestry door. Annis hugged the old woman quick. Green wax, she whispered. Chipped ring. Tomorrow at the courthouse. Then she was crawling back through the tunnel, hymnal wrapped tight in her mother's shawl. Behind her, she heard Pike cursing as the dogs lost the scent in the peppery air. The church stood dark when she emerged from the basement. Storm clouds covered the moon, making the night thick as tar. Annis slipped through the vestry door and started across the graveyard toward the plantation road. Every step felt like walking on ice. The patrollers could be anywhere. Pike's men knew these paths as well as she did, but the hymn verses guided her. Rock of Ages, cleft for me, meant the split boulder near the creek. Safe in the arms of Jesus, pointed to the hollow oak where runaway slaves could rest. She reached the plantation fence as dawn touched the eastern sky. Through the rails, she could see the big house blazing with lamplight. Pike's horse stood tied at the front steps, sides heaving from hard riding. The kitchen door was unlocked. Annis slipped inside, quiet as morning mist. The breakfast fire was already lit, but no one moved in the servants' quarters. The whole place felt wrong, like a house holding its breath. Footsteps on the main staircase. Lorena's voice, sharp with anger. I won't sign anything until Father's awake to approve it. Master Harrow's in no condition to conduct business. Pike's voice, smooth as snake oil. And these debts won't wait. Sign the transfer papers or lose the plantation. What transfer papers? Annis pressed her ear to the dining room door. Through the keyhole, she could see Lorena standing beside her father's sickbed. Master Harrow lay unconscious, fever having claimed him again in the night. Pike held a sheaf of legal documents, his face hard as winter ground. Slave auction papers, Pike said. The troublesome ones go south tomorrow, the ones with book learning, the ones who might spread ideas. And if I refuse, then the creditors seize everything. House, land, slaves, everything gets sold to cover the debts. Pike's smile was cold. At least this way, you keep the property. Just lose the dangerous stock. Lorena's hands shook as she looked at the papers. These names. You're selling whole families. Business is business. Through the keyhole, Annis watched Lorena's face change. The morning's girl who'd sneered, slaves are disgusting, was gone. In her place stood a woman seeing the true cost of cruelty. I need time to think. Time's up. Sign now, or watch everything burn. Lorena reached for the pen with trembling fingers. The papers rustled as she drew them close. In the margin of the top page, Annis could see a wax seal. Red wax, not green. Pike was using the wrong clerk. That's when Annis made her choice. She opened the dining room door and walked in calm as Sunday morning. Miss Lorena, she said, curtsying low. You sent for me. Pike spun around, his face going purple. How did you, the patrollers said. I've been in the attic, sir, hiding like you told me. Annis kept her voice steady, even as her heart hammered. Miss Lorena said she needed to see me before any papers got signed. Lorena's eyes went wide. She hadn't sent for anyone. But something in Annis's careful words, her meaningful look, made her play along. Yes, Lorena said slowly. Before I sign anything, I want to hear what Annis has to say about these accounts. A slave's word means nothing in court, Pike snarled. Maybe not, Annis said, unwrapping the hymnal from her mother's shawl. But these numbers might. She opened the book to a page she'd marked in the tunnel. Not hymn verses this time, but figures written in the margins. Numbers she'd memorized from Pike's hidden ledger. These are the real debts, she said, reading the figures aloud. Not what Mr. Pike's been telling you. The plantation owes half what he claims, and there's money missing. 3 years' worth. Pike lunged for the book, but Lorena stepped between them. Let her finish. The baby switching, Annis continued, her voice growing stronger. Miriam's not Master Harrow's bloodkin. None of the children are. Mr. Pike bought them to keep the family name good for borrowing money. Lorena's face went white. That's impossible. The proof's in the courthouse files. Green wax seals from Clerk Whitcomb, the only clerk who used that color for the most important documents. If you look at the old Harrow papers, you'll find the real records. Pike drew his knife. Enough lies from this little witch. But before he could move, voices rose from the front yard. Horses, wagon wheels, a crowd gathering at the plantation gate. Court day, Annis said simply. Time for truth. Through the window, she could see Mrs. Bell's wagon leading a procession toward the courthouse. Behind her rode men in dark coats, lawyers, maybe, or federal marshals. Either way, Pike's face told the story. His schemes had finally caught up with him. You can sign those false papers, Annis told Lorena. Let Mr. Pike sell innocent families to cover his theft. Or you can come to the courthouse and see what green wax really reveals. Lorena looked at her father's pale face, then at the papers in her hand. The pen trembled between her fingers. Get the carriage, she told Pike. Her voice was steady now, decided. We're going to town. Pike's hand tightened on the knife handle. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," Lorena said, "but it'll be my mistake to make." As the carriage pulled away from the big house, Anis clutched her mother's shawl tight. The locket at her throat caught the morning light. In a few hours, green wax and a chipped ring would tell their story to the court. The truth would come out at last. Whether that truth would set her free or cost her life remained to be seen. The courthouse square buzzed with mourning voices. Farmers brought their disputes. Merchants settled their accounts. Lawyers shuffled papers while their clients waited nervous on the wooden benches. And somewhere in that crowd, a 10-year-old girl with a perfect memory prepared to change everything. Anis sat in Mrs. Bell's wagon, the hymnal wrapped careful in her mother's shawl. Through the canvas cover, she could see Pike's carriage drawing up to the courthouse steps. Lorena climbed down slow, her face pale in the morning light. Master Harrow had been left home with the fever, too sick to travel. "There's Clark Whitcomb, Mrs." Bell whispered, pointing to a thin man with wire spectacles climbing the courthouse steps. "I showed him the ledger entries this morning. He's been checking his files ever since." The clerk's hands shook as he unlocked the courthouse door. Even from a distance, Anis could see the worry lines creasing his forehead. A man who'd built his reputation on careful record-keeping, now facing proof that someone had been forging documents in his name. "What if the ring doesn't match?" Anis asked. "Then we trust in Providence, Mrs." Bell said firmly. "Truth has a way of surfacing, child, like cream rising to the top." Pike strode past their wagon without a glance, his face set hard as granite. 3 patrollers flanked him, hands resting on their rifle stocks. Behind them came a lawyer in a black coat, carrying a leather satchel thick with papers. "Sale documents," Moses said from the wagon seat. He'd refused to stay hidden at the plantation. "Pike's moving fast now, wants to get those families sold before anyone can stop him." Through the courthouse windows, Anis could see the morning session beginning. Judge Fairfax took his place at the high bench, while the clerk arranged his seal stamps and wax blocks on the side table. Red wax for common documents, blue for court orders. And there, sitting apart from the others, a block of green wax that caught the lamplight like an emerald. "Time," Mrs. Bell said. Anis climbed down from the wagon on legs that felt like water. The hymnal stayed wrapped in her shawl, but she'd memorized every number from the hidden ledger, every false entry, every stolen dollar. The truth lived in her head now, safe from Pike's reaching hands. The courthouse steps creaked under her bare feet. Conversation stopped as folks noticed the small brown girl walking calm toward the big doors. Some faces showed curiosity. Others displayed the cold stare she'd known all her life. But a few, including old Dr. Lyle from town, nodded with something like respect. "That's the child who reads Latin," someone whispered. "Save the Harrow baby." "Slave girl with book learning," another voice hissed. "Should have been whipped long ago." Anis kept walking. At the courthouse doors, a patroller moved to block her path. "Where do you think you're going?" "Court business," she said simply. Lorena appeared at her elbow. "She's with me." The patroller hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, the courthouse hummed with nervous energy. Pike had taken a seat at the front table, his lawyer spreading documents like a card dealer. The families he planned to sell sat in the back rows, mothers clutching babies, fathers staring at the floor. Clerk Whitcomb looked up as they entered. His eyes found Anis, then moved to Mrs. Bell, who nodded once. The clerk's hand went to his coat pocket, touching something hidden there. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Fairfax." The morning session began with routine business, property disputes, debt collections, marriage licenses and death certificates. Pike waited his turn, fingers drumming against the table. His lawyer checked his watch, eager to conclude their business before anyone could interfere. Finally, Judge Fairfax called Pike's case. "Overseer Pike, you've requested emergency sale papers for problem slaves. Present your evidence." Pike stood, his voice carrying across the packed courtroom. "Your Honor, recent events have shown that certain slaves on the Harrow plantation pose a danger to public order. One in particular has been caught with book learning, spreading seditious ideas among the others." Every eye turned to Anis. She felt the weight of their stares but kept her face calm. The locket at her throat seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. "Furthermore," Pike continued, "Master Harrow's illness has left the plantation unable to manage these dangerous elements. For the safety of the community, they must be sold immediately. The lawyer opened his satchel, producing a stack of documents sealed with red wax. Sale papers, transfer orders, all bearing what looked like official stamps. Judge Fairfax studied the papers with a frown. These seals look proper. Clerk Whitcomb, are these your stamps? The clerk stood slowly, his hand still touching his coat pocket. Your Honor, I need to examine those seals more carefully. Pike's lawyer objected. The papers are clearly in order. We request immediate approval. Nevertheless, the judge said firmly, the clerk will examine the documents. Clerk Whitcomb walked to Pike's table and lifted the first paper to the lamplight. Annis watched his face change as he studied the red wax seal. His fingers traced the impression, looking for something specific. This seal, he said finally, is not mine. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Pike's face went purple. That's impossible. Your name is on the filing date. My name, yes, but not my seal. The clerk reached into his coat pocket and drew out a silver ring. This is my official seal ring. It has a distinctive chip on the left side. Here, these papers show no such chip. Pike's lawyer snatched the documents. Perhaps the impression wasn't clear. Or perhaps, Clerk Whitcomb said, his voice gaining strength, someone has been forging documents in my name. Judge Fairfax leaned forward. That's a serious accusation. Indeed, which is why I've spent the morning reviewing my files. The clerk returned to his table and picked up a wooden box. These are the original Harrow family documents, filed over the past 3 years, all bearing my genuine seal. He opened the box, revealing papers sealed with green wax. Each impression showed the chipped ring clearly. But more importantly, the documents told a different story than Pike's version. The Harrow debts, Clerk Whitcomb announced, are significantly less than claimed in these forged papers. Furthermore, there are irregularities in the family lineage records that suggest deliberate falsification. Pike shot to his feet. You're taking the word of slaves over sworn documents. I'm taking the word of my own files, the clerk replied calmly. Files that show a pattern of document forgery spanning 3 years. That's when Lorena stood. Her voice carried clearly across the courtroom. Your Honor, I have something to add. Judge Fairfax nodded. Miss Harrow, you may speak. Lorena walked to the front of the courtroom, her hands trembling but her voice steady. 2 days ago, I said something terrible. I called slaves disgusting. I said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Murmurs filled the air. Some nodded approval, others shifted uncomfortable in their seats. But then, Lorena continued, this child saved my baby cousin's life. She read Latin better than most educated men. She showed compassion when I showed only cruelty. Her voice cracked. I was wrong, shamefully, terribly wrong. Pike's lawyer objected. Your Honor, this testimony is irrelevant to the sale papers. On the contrary, Judge Fairfax said, Miss Harrow's testimony speaks to the character of the slaves in question. Continue, Miss Harrow. Last night Mr. Pike tried to force me to sign papers, selling entire families. He claimed it was the only way to save our plantation. But when I asked questions, he became angry, threatening. Lorena's eyes found Annis. This child showed me there was another way. A way that didn't require breaking up families or selling innocent people. And what way is that? Lorena looked at Clerk Whitcomb, who nodded encouragement. The truth, Your Honor, about the real debts, about the falsified records, about promises made and hidden away. Judge Fairfax turned to Annis. Child, you've been silent through all this. Do you have something to add? Annis felt every eye in the courthouse focus on her. The families in the back rows, the lawyers at their tables, the patrollers with their weapons, all waiting to hear what a 10-year-old slave girl might say that could change their world. She touched the locket at her throat, thinking of her mother's voice singing hymns by candlelight, of Latin lessons whispered in secret, of the perfect memory that had become both blessing and curse. Your Honor, she said, her voice clear and strong, I remember everything. What do you remember, child? The real ledger entries, the ones Mr. Pike hid in the smokehouse, the babies that got switched to keep the Harrow name good for borrowing, the money that got moved between accounts to hide the theft. Pike exploded. Lies! The ravings of an ignorant slave. But Annis continued, her voice never wavering. I remember the Latin words on the doctor's notes, the hymn verses that map safe crossings, The manumission clause that promised freedom to my grandmother's bloodline. She looked directly at Clerk Whitcomb. And I remember the green wax seals that prove which documents are real. Judge Fairfax studied her for a long moment. These are serious allegations. Do you have proof? The proof is in your files, Your Honor. In the old Harrow papers with the real green wax seals, in the manumission clause that got filed wrong on purpose. In the family tree that shows 3 babies got switched over the years. Clerk Whitcomb opened another section of his wooden box. Your Honor, I found the document she's referring to. A manumission clause from 15 years ago, signed by Master Harrow's father. It promises freedom to the family of Rachel in perpetuity. What happened to this clause? It was filed as applying to one person only. But the Latin wording clearly extends to the entire bloodline. The clerk's voice grew firm. This child and her companions should have been freed years ago. The courtroom erupted. Pike lunged for the documents, but the patrollers restrained him. His lawyer tried to object, but Judge Fairfax pounded his gavel for order. Furthermore, Clerk Whitcomb continued when the noise died down, I've discovered evidence of systematic document forgery. Someone has been using fake seals to create false debts and illegal sale orders. Pike's face had gone white as winter. You can't prove Actually, the clerk said quietly, I can. He reached into the wooden box one more time and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. When he unfolded the fabric, a second ring gleamed in the lamplight, similar to his official seal, but with subtle differences. I found this in Mr. Pike's office safe this morning. A forgery of my official seal ring, expertly made, but lacking the distinctive chip. He held up his genuine ring beside the fake. 2 rings, one real, one false. The false one matches the seals on these forged sale papers. Judge Fairfax examined both rings carefully. The evidence was clear. Pike had been forging documents for years, stealing money and manipulating family records to keep his schemes hidden. Mr. Pike, the judge said finally, you are under arrest for document forgery and embezzlement. These sale papers are declared void. But Pike wasn't finished. As the patrollers moved to arrest him, he pulled a derringer from his coat and pointed it at Annis. That little witch ruined everything. He snarled. She's got too much learning, too much memory. She'll ruin other families if she lives. The courthouse went dead silent. Mothers clutched their children. Men reached for weapons they didn't have. Pike's hand shook as he aimed the small pistol. Then Annis began to sing. Soft as summer rain, her voice filled the courthouse with the old hymn. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. The perfect pitch seemed to reach something deep in Pike's chest. His breathing slowed to match the melody's rhythm. The gun wavered in his shaking hand. Other voices joined in. Mrs. Bell from the gallery. Moses from the back row. Even some of the white folks who knew the hymn from Sunday service. The music swelled and surrounded Pike like a gentle tide. His face crumpled. The derringer dropped from nerveless fingers. As the patrollers led him away, he was weeping like a child. Judge Fairfax waited for the song to end before speaking again. When he did, his voice carried the weight of law and justice. In light of the evidence presented, I declare the manumission clause to be valid and properly executed. The families named in this document are hereby declared free. He paused, looking directly at Annis. Furthermore, given the exceptional circumstances and the child's remarkable abilities, I grant full freedom to Annis and recommend her placement with a family capable of nurturing her education. Mrs. Bell stood. Your Honor, my husband and I would be honored to take responsibility for the child's education and welfare. So ordered. The courthouse erupted again, but this time with joy. Families embraced. Tears flowed freely. Doctor. Lyle pushed through the crowd to shake Annis's hand, declaring her the finest young scholar I've ever encountered. But it was Lorena who mattered most. She approached Annis slowly, her face wet with tears. I'm sorry, she whispered, for what I said, for what I believed, for how wrong I was. Annis looked up at her, this young woman who had learned to see past her own prejudice. You changed your mind, she said simply. That takes courage. Lorena knelt, so they were eye to eye. Will you forgive me? Already have, miss. That's what freedom means. Starting fresh. As the courthouse crowd began to disperse, Clerk Whitcomb approached with a small wooden box. "Your freedom papers," he told Annis, "properly sealed with green wax. And this," he handed her the genuine seal ring. "Keep it safe. It's proof that truth matters more than power." The evening sun painted the courthouse, steps golden, as families prepared for new lives. Wagons waited to carry some north to settlements where freedom meant safety. Others chose to stay and work the land they'd always known, but now as paid laborers with rights under law. Annis sat on the courthouse steps, the hymnal open in her lap, the same steps where Pike had tried to force through his fraudulent papers. Now they were a place of victory, of justice served and families made whole. Moses approached with his own freedom papers folded careful in his coat pocket. "Where will you go, child?" "Missus. Bell's farm is just north of here. She says they need someone to help with the books. Someone who remembers numbers exact." "And the hymns?" Annis smiled, touching the locket at her throat. "I'll teach them. The real words and the hidden meanings. So nobody forgets the paths to freedom." Mrs. Bell's wagon pulled up to the courthouse steps. Her husband sat beside her on the driver's seat, his face kind despite his Quaker stern dress. In the wagon bed lay Annis's few possessions, her mother's shawl, the hymnal, and the small wooden box containing her freedom papers. As they prepared to leave, Lorena appeared one last time. She carried a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. "For you," she said, offering the package to Annis. "I know it's not enough to make up for what I said, but—" Annis unwrapped the paper carefully. Inside lay a beautiful new hymnal, its leather cover tooled with golden notes, and tucked between the pages, a letter of recommendation written in Lorena's careful script. "For any school that will have you," Lorena said. "You deserve every opportunity to use that remarkable mind." The wagon creaked as they rolled away from the courthouse. In the growing dusk, lanterns began to glow in windows throughout the town. Families gathering for supper, children learning their letters by lamplight. A world where a girl with perfect memory might grow up to be a teacher, a scholar, a voice for justice. As they reached the edge of town, Annis looked back at the courthouse one more time. On the steps where justice had been served, Clerk Whitcomb was raising a lantern to signal the end of a day's work. The green wax seal glinted in his other hand, symbol of truth preserved despite all attempts to corrupt it. Mrs. Bell's farm lay just ahead, its windows warm with welcoming light. A new life waited there, new songs to learn and teach, new words to master in languages that would open doors across the world. Annis touched her locket and began to hum. Not the old hymn of escape, but a new melody that spoke of hope fulfilled and promises kept. The sound drifted across the darkening fields, carrying on the evening breeze like a prayer made manifest.